One of the interesting things to me about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community is how inconsistent player knowledge is. I mean, every game's gonna have its newbies, and its pro players, and a bunch of people in between who are still learning the game. But in Yu-Gi-Oh! It feels like that last section is much larger and more diverse than other games. Like, there's this vast gulf of people who know enough strategy to make intelligent deck-building decisions, while still walking right into some mathematically bad design choices. Probably the biggest example of this I see is people playing key cards at 2 because they're afraid that they're going to brick if they play them at 3. This logic is commonly applied to Pot of Desire, so let's use that as an example. If you're unfamiliar with it, its effect is pretty simple. Banish the top 10 cards from your deck face down, draw 2 cards. You can only activate 1 Pot of Desires per turn. Now, if you know anything about card advantage, you know that drawing 2 cards for essentially no cost is a good thing. More cards in hand means more plays and more options to make those plays, which usually means you're more likely to win. Yeah, in this case you do have to banish a fourth of your deck in order to get those extra cards in hand, but the cards that you lost weren't helping you to make plays at that moment. And if you can make an unstoppable board now with the cards you just drew, then those lost cards don't really matter. Now, a lot of people like to say, with varying degrees of seriousness, that the cost of desires is too high, that banishing 10 cards from your deck makes it a -9 and not worth playing. That's a topic for another video, but needless to say, it's not the cost that makes Pot of Desire so risky, it's that restriction at the end. You can only activate 1 Pot of Desires each turn. That means if you open with 2 copies, or you activate a copy and draw into another one, that you've got a dead card on your hands, effectively negating any advantage that you would have gotten. And if you happen to open with all 3 copies in your hand, well, you might as well just banish your hopes of winning face down. It's this restriction that causes people to make some flawed decisions. They want to see Pot of Desires as soon as possible, but they don't want to see more than 1 copy. The solution they come up with is to just run 2 copies of Desires. That way they still have 2 chances to draw it, but the chance that they'll get both of those copies is much less. At least that's what they think. And to be fair, it is technically true, you are less likely to draw both copies of Desires. The problem is you're hurting your deck far more than you're helping it by doing this, and we can prove that with some complex maths. Allow me to introduce to you the Hypergeometric Calculator, a useful tool that can be used to find the probability of random occurrence within a finite subset. What does that mean for us? Well, basically, if you have a deck of cards and you're drawing randomly from the top of it, we can use this to determine how likely we are to draw a specific card. For example, let's say we have a 40-card deck. Inside it is 1 soul charge we want to draw. So we draw 1 card. What are the chances that we'll get that 1 card? Calculate, and we get 0.025, which, as you might expect, is a 1 in 40 chance. So now that you get the idea, let's do something a little more relevant. Say we have 40 cards again. There are 3 copies of Pot of Desires. We draw an opening hand of 5 cards, and we want to see at least 1 copy of Desires in our hand. Calculate, and we get 0.337550607. Which doesn't make for an easy to understand fraction, but fortunately you can just move the decimal point over 2 spaces and make a much more comprehensible 33%. So if you run Pot at 3, you have a 33% chance of opening with 1 copy, which is pretty decent. Now, what are your chances of opening 2 copies? Well, we just switch the number of successes from 1 to 2, and we'll see that it's 0.036437247. Which is about 3%. Pretty low. So now that we have these base statistics, let's check out the same probabilities, but with 2 copies of Pot of Desires. With 2 Desires in the deck, drawing 5 cards, your chance to get 1 Desires is about 23%. So by running 1 less copy, you're making yourself about 10% less likely to see Desires in your opening hand. That's a pretty substantial hit. But is it worth it to brick less? Let's see. Take your 2 Desires, draw 5 cards, and your chance to get both Desires is 1%. Which, I mean, to be fair, is lower than 3%, but not by a whole lot. You're basically making your deck 10% worse in order to make it 2% less bricky. So unless brick hands are making you 100% saltier than not seeing your power cards, I don't think that's worth it. Now, we've just been talking about Pot of Desires here, but this idea applies to pretty much any strong card, whether it's once per turn or not. If it's going to give you a big advantage first turn, if it's something you want to see in your opening hand, then it's always worth running at 3. Of course, if you don't need a card in your opening hand, then running it at 1 or 2 is perfectly fine. A deck like Spellbooks or Sky Strikers that has the ability to search and recycle its more niche spells can easily get away with running less than 3 copies of them. Likewise, if you got a card like, I don't know, Jar of Avarice that you only want to see late game, playing it in smaller numbers so that you're less likely to open with a copy is a decent idea. And of course, 40 cards isn't divisible by 3 anyway, so you're always going to end up with at least 1 card that isn't a 3 of. Despite what the title says, you don't literally need to play everything at 3, not all the time. There's always exceptions, there's always times when it's relevant. But in most cases, with most decks, you're gonna want to play everything at 3. So thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed. If you'd like to see more videos like this, let me know down in the comments. Drop a like, drop a subscribe, I do other Yu-Gi-Oh! Related shit and some non-Yu-Gi-Oh! Related shit. I have a Let's Play channel, you can check that out. And, oh yeah, this is all ad-free, you got no ads, so if you want to support me making stuff like this, check out my Patreon. For $1, you get a whole bunch of cool rewards. But yeah, hope you enjoy. Until next time, good luck, and have fun.